Welcome to the Etihad Cargo Connections with 10 Furlongs magazine. I'm your host today, Aurelian. Chris Wall settled in his first winner in 1987 and has been responsible for the likes of Premier Loco, Mix and Mingle, and a bit more recently, Double or Bubble in 2022. Just 4 months after ending in his license, after being appointed racing manager to ambitious Bahraini operation KHK Racing, Chris Wall is also an EBF trustee, providing race programming insight to the board. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Great. So, Chris, for the first question, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talk about this, but let me ask you one more time. When did your love of horses begin?
Well, I was born into a horsey family. Parents had a small farm. Dad was very into his hunting and point-to-pointing and then steeplechase racing. And so I think I was stuck on the back of a pony at the age of 4. Wow. And sort of rode pretty much ever since, got involved with racing after school. And anyway, sort of eventually found my way into the ranks of being a trainer.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was, I suppose when I was at school, I should have done better at school than I did, but I probably used to spend too much time reading the racing newspapers and not enough time doing my homework. And I suppose it was probably inevitable I was going to end up doing something with horses. I came to Newmarket in 1979 to work for a leading trainer then called Bruce Hobbs, and it went from there. I worked for other big trainers, Barry Hills, Sir Mark Prescott, Luca Kamani, and then eventually got my opportunity to train in 1987.
You made your own way. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. How did you get involved with KHK, Bahraini owners, especially?
Well, I'd had no tie-up with Bahrain prior to the appointment, other than for the sort of couple of years before we packed up, after the horses in training sale, we used to look after some horses for sort of 3 or 4 weeks before they shipped out to Bahrain. And so had a little bit of a connection there. But I'm not quite sure how the KHK thing came about. I mean, I think a friend of mine rang me up and said, would I be interested in doing a job like that? And I said, I would, yes. Then I had a call from Sheikh Dej and had an interview, and then I was appointed and took up my post in April.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How different it is, like working with Bahraini owners versus working with people in the UK.
Well, I have to say that Sheikh Khaled and Sheikh Dej, who I talk to a lot, are very easy people. They have yes, they're Middle Eastern, but they have a very European outlook. Okay. And so that makes my job a lot easier. No, I have a good relationship with them, and so it's a change of pace from being a trainer. I have to approach it a bit differently. Ultimately, the decisions aren't necessarily mine. I'm there to sort of advise and help. Leave it up to the trainers of the horses themselves to make the big decisions. But you help. You're part of that process and try and help out where you can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. As we've seen in the Racing Post feature, you've had a remarkable history, in horse racing. How does your experience as a trainer really influence your role as a racing manager, especially for KHK Racing?
Well, I think I'll just be able to bring that experience of training horses, of campaigning horses, not just in Britain, but in Europe, and we have runners around the world. So I can help to give sort of advice on the best way forward with horses, which campaigns they should have. And the trainers have their own mind on that. But if they want to bounce ideas off me, I feel I'm sort of sufficiently experienced and have the gravitas to be able to help them in making a decision.
Okay, very good. So I just want to talk a bit more about the aspect of managing the racing operation. So how do you approach this, this operation for Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa KHK Racing?
Well, as a trainer, one of the trainers, most trainers look at a racing manager and roll their eyes and think they're going to be there. They sort of interpose between the trainer and the owner. And so what I'm trying to do is have a very soft touch on that. I view my role as one of communication, making sure that Sheikh Khalid has all the right information when entries are made, when plans are being discussed, that he knows what's going on. I think before my appointment, that was very much sort of an ad hoc thing, and he wasn't always aware of what was happening. So it's my, communication is the main role, and that's twofold because that works both ways. It's also to communicate what Sheikh Khalid would like to do and the way he would like things to progress, and making sure the trainers are aware of that. And then obviously you're representing KHK when we have runners in races, go and represent KHK, and just be an ambassador for KHK, really.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk a bit more about horses now. So what are you looking for when you send instructions for buying horses like, let's say, Eldar Eldarov?
Well, Eldar Eldarov was purchased before my time, but and I'm not actually, part of my job as manager is not to be involved with the purchase. That's left to Anthony Stroud mainly, who's sort of one of the most well-known bloodstock agents. But Sheikh Khalid will, he knows himself what type of horse that he wants, and then he'll say to me, and I'll pass it on to Anthony as to what is required. Sheikh Khalid is a lot of the better horses that we have. Sheikh Khalid has sort of selected himself through looking at the pedigrees and the catalogues and the pictures and things on there. So it probably makes everybody's job a bit easier that he knows in his own mind what it is that he wants.
Excellent. Wow. Are you able to give any advices, I guess, in the purchase specifically?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. If I think when certainly when we get to a point where are we going to buy horse A or horse B, then I'll put in my six penneth worth, as we say, and see what comes of it.
Great. So Eldar Eldarov ended this season with an Irish Classic win. What are the expectations and aspirations for this talented horse in the upcoming season?
Well, next year he will. His program will be fairly similar to the one that he had this year, I would think. He's. We found that his best distance is probably 1 mile 6 furlongs, 1 3/4 miles. Yes, he stays 2 miles, but I think he's more effective. He has a better sort of finishing acceleration over 1 mile 6 than he does over 2 miles. But there's a very limited program of races over 1 mile 6 furlongs. We actually only really have 3 races, which are the Yorkshire Cup in May. There's a race in France in July, and then the Irish St. Leger again in early September. So there'd be his sort of 3 main targets, I think, for the season. I don't be surprised if you see him turn up somewhere over 1.5 miles, just because, if we want to run him, we'd probably rather do that than run him 2 miles.
Sure, that makes sense.
But it doesn't mean to say he won't run 2 miles either. It's just, when you've got the races, you've got to run in them. But he wouldn't have a. We found, he had 2 or 3 goes in races. We ran him in the Ascot Gold Cup last year, which is 2.5 miles, and clearly he didn't stay that distance at all. So we won't be doing that again. If he runs at Royal Ascot, he'll probably run in the Hardwick Stakes over 1.5 miles. But basically, the main races we want to target are those 3 opportunities over 1 mile 6 furlongs.
Which makes sense, definitely.
Yeah.
Talking about Van Dijk now. So Van Dijk has enjoyed a fantastic season so far. Could you discuss the horse development and any strategies maybe to maximize his potential heading into 2024?
He's not your stereotypical sprinting 2-year-old. They're usually sort of medium-sized, short coupled, very muscular type of horses.
Mhm.
And he's the very antithesis of that, really. And he's quite tall, leggy, long, bit narrow. But he has a lot of natural speed. And you'd have to think that as he grows from 2 into 3 years old through the winter, that he's going to get stronger, and which he will need to improve from 2 to 3, and hopefully as he strengthens, he'll get, he'll improve. So at the moment he's just in winter work, not doing very much, just ticking away. His preparation for next season will sort of start in earnest in sort of late January, early February, depending on what the weather's doing here. And then with the view, he's going to stay sprinting. We're not trying to train him for the 2,000 guineas. He's going to stay sprinting. So his season will probably start in May, most likely at Haydock in a Group 2 sprint there. And then he'll go to Royal Ascot for the Commonwealth Cup, which is his principal early season target. After that, he'll have to mix it with the older horses, and so all those sort of Group 1 sprints like the July Cup, and maybe the Maurice de Geest in Deauville, and then the Sprint Cup at Haydock. They'll all come. They'll all be part of his program if everything's okay.
So quite a busy schedule for him ahead.
I think so. I mean, I'm likely to be. But he showed last year. I mean, his first 3 races all took place in the space of 5 or 6 weeks. He went from winning his maiden to winning a Group 2 at Goodwood, and then the Prix Morny in Deauville, and that was all within the space of 5 or 6 weeks. So he showed that he's mentally resilient, physically tough. He can take a busy schedule, I think.
That's great. Now talking about Knight. Knight is also an intriguing prospect. What qualities or strengths sets him apart, and what goals do you have for him next season?
Well, he had a bit of an unfortunate start to the season this year. Obviously, at the end of his 2-year-old career, he'd won the Horace Hill in impressive fashion, and the hope was that he could prove competitive in one of the mile classics somewhere. His run in the Greenham Stakes was disappointing. He didn't show much sparkle there. We blamed the ground because it was very, very soft, and we blamed the ground. And then we took him to France for the the French 2,000 guineas, the Poulain, and he got down to the start. They put him in the stalls. He got very upset in the stalls, and he kicked and cut his leg badly, and he had to be withdrawn. But on top of that, we also discovered that he was retracting his testicles, and he was getting a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and that was what was causing him to get very upset. So obviously he had to have the ultimate operation and be castrated, which took out a large chunk of the middle of the season for him. And then he came back and he ran very creditably in his races, bar for his last race, when probably at the end of a long season was just one race too many. But up until then, he had, he acquitted himself very well. And I think going forward, he'll certainly be campaigned over a mile. And I know Simon Crisford and Ed, who train him, are quite keen to try him over 10 furlongs at some point. So we'll see how he goes for next season. I would expect him. He's another one, should be stronger, and hopefully, if he gets off to a good start to his season, which he didn't this year, if he can get off to a better start, then I think he's an exciting horse. He's sort of one of those horses we hope will be a good enough horse that you can campaign him in all those sort of overseas races that are quite valuable, and with a bit of luck, he'll more than pay his way.
For sure, especially with the operation that takes time, I guess, to get back into.
Yeah, it takes time. I know. It's not. He had a lot of sort of messing about before that when we were trying to find out what was the problem and how to best to deal with it. So he had a bit of an unfortunate season, but he came back well, and I think sort of next year, so he's had a winter off, he's had some time out, and he should come back stronger, and I think hopefully be sort of happier in his mind as well, and can go and have a good year.
Let's hope for that, definitely.
Sure.
So KHK Racing has been making headlines in the industry. What unique challenges and opportunities come with managing a stable, associated with the Bahrain royal family?
Well, Sheikh Khalid is ambitious, as you say. He wants to be competing in the best races around the world, really. When we have the right horses for that, he's not afraid to want to take it on. So the challenges are making sure that we've got a good team of horses. We know we've got a good team of trainers, and hope we can develop it from there and take it forward as time goes on. With the right, we've been very fortunate in the short space of time that KHK has been in existence. That we've already won quite a few group races. We've won 4 Group 1 races in short time. Other operations have taken a lot longer to get that far. But obviously the pressure's on to keep it going, and so fingers crossed, and hopefully we can keep it going forward and keep KHK in the forefront of things. Definitely.
It seems like the team is very strong and very easygoing. It seems like the whole
It is, yeah, definitely. I think that's the best way. I think want people involved with KHK to know that they're involved and feel that they're part of the team, and that that they can then. I think that way they'll make the right decisions. They won't feel under pressure. That they'll make the right decisions, and then we'll get the right results as well.
Great. So that partnership between KHK Racing and, to come back to Eldar Eldarov, is quite notable. How did this collaboration come about, and what aspects of Eldar Eldarov's racing style make him a standout contender?
Well, I think Eldar Eldarov, he was purchased at the Breeze Up sales as a 2-year-old. And he wasn't really an obvious one to buy as a 2-year-old, because he's not. Most of those horses are bred for, the Breeze Up horses are speedy horses that are going to sprint or go a mile. There aren't many potential stayers there, and as ultimately a true stayer, he obviously can't have clocked particularly fast fractions in his breeze, I wouldn't think. But I know that he was a horse that Sheikh Khalid was keen on from his pedigree, and as a racehorse, what does he bring? He brings a good temperament, a solid temperament. He brings. He's a very willing horse, although he's a little bit lazy in his work at home, but in his races, he's a very willing horse. He's a true competitor, and when he's asked to go and challenge, he's got a good turn of foot, and he really watch him. You'll see him put his head down, his ears go back, and he really wants to take it on and give it a go. So they are his strengths, I think.
Great. That sounds excellent. I just want to come back a little bit about your management. So being involved with KHK Racing, what kind of initiatives or changes you've implemented to enhance the overall performance and well-being of the horses there?
I don't think I've had to do much as regards the horses and things like that. The trainers that we employ are very experienced. They're the sort of some of the better trainers that there are in this country, and so I don't have to be involved with that. You know that they're getting the very best care. That's why we're employing them to train for KHK. And what can I bring to it? I don't know. I think I can just sort of, again, take the pressure off through communication. They can speak to me anytime. Whereas obviously with Sheikh Khalid, it can be a little bit more difficult with, he's a busy man, but also with the slight time difference as well. But they can speak to me. I can get things, get things rolling, as it were, and help out. So hopefully I'm sort of helping to sort of oil the wheels and keep everything turning smoothly.
Great. How does it feel for you to move from being a trainer to being a manager?
Well, it's a very different pace. Obviously, when you're training, it's full on 7 days a week. You've got runners all the time. You've got things to deal with training your horses and managing your yard. As a manager, my time, I have it's not as busy, obviously, but still I have to keep, you've got to keep your finger on the pulse. I have to spend time every day just sort of watching out for horses being entered, for declarations, for talking to people, going watch horses gallop. Obviously, this time of year we're quiet because the season's has wound down. The turf season's finished, and it's not quite so busy now. But you've got to keep an eye on what's going on and report back, and so it's kept my interest going. It's not been too much of a shock from stopping training and having nothing to do. It's been able to keep my interest up and keep involved, and it's nice to go to the races and not ultimately to have to worry too much about if it doesn't go right, why did it go wrong?
Sure. And I guess a bit more time with the family, I guess.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, mind you, that bird's flown a bit because my son's away now and he's grown up and away, and got his own life. But yeah, it gives you a bit more time. I've got a lot more social life now than I ever did have before.
That's great. Are there any major racing events in the Middle East that you are targeting for either Eldar Eldarov, Van Dijk, or Knight, especially this season?
I think, well, Eldar Eldarov could, his first target for next year is probably to try and get him ready to run in the Dubai Gold Cup on World Cup night. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things dependent. It depends on how the weather is, because I think they tried last year to get him ready for that race, but we had a very cold winter, and he didn't take his preparation very well, so that was scrapped. But if all goes well for him, he could go for that. At the moment, no plans for Knight or Van Dijk. Certainly won't go to the Middle East at this point in his career. Knight, we're not planning on running him there this spring, but it doesn't mean to say that further down the line that might be an option for him.
Fair enough. So it's a bit different, I guess, from running, let's say, in Europe versus running in the Middle East or elsewhere also.
Well, there are a lot of, as you know now, there's a lot of races, a lot of very valuable races throughout the Middle East. And I mean, the hope might be that he can go and compete for one of those, perhaps not next winter, not this winter. I think, he needed a break this winter after all the problems he's had this summer. But it doesn't mean to say that sort of next winter we might, if he's training well, if he's going well, that some of those valuable mile and a quarter races in the Middle East could be part of his program.
Great. So as you mentioned, Chris, you've been in this industry for quite a while, and you probably have seen a lot of changes. Is there anything else like you would like to see change in the future?
Well, overall, no. I mean, racing's been around a long time. We hope it'll keep going. British racing's beset with its usual problems with financing and things like that. I'd like to see that cleared up. It's important. You can see not just through KHK, but there's a very large Middle Eastern presence in British racing. It's very important for British racing in the future that we're able to retain that support, and so we must get funding sorted out, because if not, they'll want to go and race elsewhere, and they like racing in Britain. I think they feel comfortable here, they feel safe here, so it would be nice for that connection to continue, but it needs our government to pull its finger out and give us some bit more financial support.
For sure. How do you feel about the younger generation? Do you think they are also getting interested in this industry or not?
There seem to be quite a few young people getting involved. If you go racing in Britain at the moment, racecourses have made a big effort to attract a younger audience. So there is a connection there between younger people. Of course, as an older person in racing, you wonder what they get out of it. But you think, well, actually, when I was a young person in racing, I didn't have the same view about it as my father would have done. So they'll come at it from a different way. But there does seem to be still quite a bit of interest. British racing is still, after football, after soccer, It's the most watched sport in the country, so it still has a good audience. But we need to keep working on that, because you can't take it for granted that they'll always be there.
That's true. It's changing a lot, especially with technology these days. People are getting more and more interested into technology and
yes,
sure.
yes, yeah. Well, I think racing is pretty good. And I think there are lots of different platforms that you're able to watch racing. You don't have to go to the races, and racing is pretty good at streaming and whatever, lots of different ways of watching racing. But we need to keep on top of that, and obviously go with technology and embrace it rather than fight against it.
That's very true. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for that. I enjoyed the interview.
Okay, jolly good. All the best then.
Thank you. You as well. Have a nice rest of your day.